I guess the first thing to say is hello, and then why we're here and what we're doing and who we are, and we're going to have, I think, a great show. I don't know exactly why. I just feel it. You wanna take it over? Okay.
Do I want to take it over? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is Gary Lowenthal, and I am Lisa Qualls.
And we go back.
Yeah.
To what, about 2004 or thereabout, right? And
Yeah.
that was turning point.
I don't remember when I met you. Do you remember when we met? I don't either.
No, you just sort of
we were just at the same
gradually
actions,
like eased into the circle.
Yeah.
And but we both went vegan around the same time, right? And then we've been active like with the vegan community and had lots of other things going on. You know, like everybody out there, there's what you do is, you know, you could be a novel yourself because it's a pretty complicated, because life's complicated and has ups and downs. And then our circles have intersected quite a bit. And we're going to get like to real topics, but we just wanted to start off with, you know, who we are.
Yeah.
So you've been like more active than I have been.
I've been differently active, I guess.
But
as for like.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've both done street actions, and then we were both involved in the formation of Compassion for Animals, and then Gary took off with the Worldwide Vegan Bake Sale, and we were with Action for Animals Network, weren't we, before that?
I mean, yeah, well,
Yeah.
we volunteered.
Yeah, we volunteered exhibiting and things like that.
So, I mean, you've done, I think, more volunteering than I have.
I do a lot of street actions.
I've gone back into, like, I had to make money. Tell me if, by the way, we want to have something like call-in, you know, you can call in while we're doing this, right? And we'll get the technology for that soon. I know other people do it, but that would be fun, right?
Yeah, and we apologize for whatever crappy image and sound quality we have right now.
Because we're going to improve on the technology. This is just the first show, right? And it's fairly unplanned, but not that you.
But
can
we
tell.
hope you stick with us. And
Yes.
our first topic is going to be.
Right. Well, but before we get to
Okay.
the first topic, I'm just going to say that these days, my activism, it's mostly, maybe except for this, like second line activism, like doing Buntopia, playing music for
he plays
vegan
really great
events.
music with Colleen.
Thank you. And she's, of course, a wonderful and diverse singer.
Amazing singer.
And we played music for cows last week, and I want to talk about that too. That was kind of amazing, actually. It was very touching.
I saw the video.
To be able to play music for these curious individuals who, they're individuals and they're also a group. And they were, in some ways, like, you know, a better crowd than a lot of humans I've played for. But, so that, and then I got the weekly lunches at Loving Hut Restaurant. There's our first plug.
Loving Hut.
But and they've been very active with you know, a lot of vegan things, and they helped out Worldwide Vegan Bake Sale, Compassion for Animals, and
Keep them out because I don't know how much sound is picking
oh
up.
right,
Yeah.
and then this, right, which was like what, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I said we should do a video show, and you said yes, and here we are. Okay.
Yeah. And
So-
just in case,
yeah.
we should mention you're going to hear some sounds that.
Right.
It might sound strange, but we live where there's 2 dogs here, and currently they're trying to play. So
Right.
there
So
could be,
it's a nice, joyful noise, but you know,
if you know what it is. Otherwise,
otherwise you have no idea, right?
it's not my stomach growling.
Right. And we decided, I think, that we agree about 85% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? So
And we've learned how to disagree nicely.
Yes, we have, right. And rule 1 is like stay offline, because this is a topic that I'm going to come back to on and on because I'm obsessed with it. Why do people act like worse online? What's driving that, right? I mean, I do the same thing too. But because at these lunches and typical face-to-face conversation, you can talk about almost anything, and you know, you won't get into a fight. You're not going to like unfriend. But you look online, and like I can almost tell you, if I see that there's like 75 comments on a post,
You don't know.
some of them are fighting.
Yeah.
Right? By the time it gets to 75, some of them are fighting. And then you get things like, okay, well, you know, I'm a real vegan, and yeah, I mean, it's just stuff that you wouldn't happen probably face to face, right? So anyway, we decided let's like go into some fairly controversial topics, and then maybe we'll end up with the Facebook review session. We'll just see what's on our feeds and talk about it, and eventually you can, you know, join us, which will be fun. And it's almost like even though this will be on YouTube. Oh, the Meandering Vegans, is that the working title?
Meandering Vegans.
Okay,
yeah,
Meandering Vegans.
We need that in the background, don't we?
We do need it in the background. Right? Oh, you know what'd be cool?
Coming soon.
Yes. If we had an intern, that would be cool. You
Yeah.
know? And then they could, if you're interested out there, like starting your broadcasting career or social justice, get in touch with us. What does that mean, get in touch with us?
I
That
guess
could be
we're
their-
going to create a Facebook page.
Okay, that could be their first job.
And
is how they
proximity
get in
would
touch
help.
with us.
Like, they'd need to live near us, right? So, unless
Yes,
there's, yeah.
right. But I don't even know. Maybe not.
There's some things that can be done remotely, yeah?
Yeah, right. So anyway, so one of the things that's and we're going to go not just vegan topics, by the way, like everything, right? And I don't know what in the world like differentiates us from like the other million YouTube stations, but I figure each one is unique and has something. So that's us too. One of the hot topics in the vegan world, and you know, a little bit outside it, is, well, there's two that are kind of related. One is, you know, the Impossible Burger, which, you know, we'll give you the background on that. You probably know it if you're vegan, but and then the clean meat or cultured meat, and you know, good, bad. Is it the solution? Is it a solution? Or does it work under certain circumstances? There's some,
And then other plant meats, too.
yeah. And I was even I
Yeah.
didn't know whether to include that or if that was like understood, but yeah, it's probably good to. Yeah,
I like
specifically,
including it.
I like including it too. Yeah, because that could be the hugest thing ever, right? It's almost a question of, to me, of like, and we're getting into it now, is how much. I mean, getting to the topic, not getting into it. We agree on this. Almost a question of like how much money goes into the efforts and how much like advertising and marketing they do, and that's.
We've talked about advertising a lot over the years.
We have. It's like advertising. It's such a weird and fascinating topic. You know, you change the shape of a container and more or fewer people buy it, right? So we like to think that we're logical and reasonable and make choices that are rational. And you know, to some extent, we do if we're deciding which operating system to get, I guess, or you know, which food to use up first in the fridge. But you know, I think like
We're more programmed than we would like to acknowledge.
and I think there's like, you know, marketers know. I mean, this is why they spend billions of dollars, right? That there's like emotional things that we respond to, and you know, you can get people to. Like, you don't even notice it sometimes, that you're buying some things and not other things, so you think things, and this is good, this is bad, this is natural, this is not. It's like so pervasive that it's not a conscious decision that you make anymore, but it was an unconscious decision that you made at some point. So anyway, that all goes back, see, we're meandering, that all goes back to, it might be, you know, in terms of what kind of displaces animal products, it might come, it sounds crass, but it might be what has the most money to spend on it.
Yeah, I think if you, like I've been noticing recently that sometimes I'll be talking to somebody and about a certain topic, and they'll interject with a different topic because that's the topic they're aware of. And it's like, that's what's in their mind, whatever's been advertised to them or whatever they've noticed or whatever their friends are using. And the other things don't really get considered. Even when you're like describing them one-on-one, sometimes they get dismissed, I think, sometimes.
Like, can you give an example?
Well, yeah. So I have a relative who contacted me because he saw something about the dog meat trade on television, and he was very upset about it. And and obviously I've spoken with him about veganism many times over the years, and he said, "How can I get involved? What can I do?" And I said, "Well, I do know people who work on that issue, but honestly, it's not any different from what happens to anyone else you're using. So if you're aware of that, then you should be, not using other animals." And I've gotten him to agree to meet with me several times, and then he cancels at the last minute to avoid hearing about that. But then one of my friends was doing something about the dog meat trade, and I thought, well, at least I can get him to dip his toe in. And so I forwarded the message to him, and I said, "Hey, here's some information." It was a festival that was happening, and I don't know where it was right now, but it was a recent protest about a festival where they eat dogs.
Oh, the Yulin?
I think it was
Okay.
Yulin. Yeah, I was afraid to say that because I wasn't sure, but
right.
Yeah. So I told him about it, and he said, "Well, yeah, but this other place where they eat dogs is an issue too." And so because he saw something about that on TV, he's completely invested in that, because whatever happened on TV that clicked with him,
Right.
he's not extrapolating it and applying it to other issues.
Now, let me ask you this. Remember, we're meandering. So when someone hears about, a festival or an event where they're eating dogs, and, I mean, it's easier for them to be irate about that because they're not doing it themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the challenge is, telling them that, you're doing essentially the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you buy a hamburger.
Mm-hmm.
And that's harder, I think, in one sense, because then you have to, people think of themselves as good people, as decent people. And people tend to have enough decent qualities to kind of, in most situations back that up. But then what do they do when they find out that they're doing something that's horrible, that really goes against our fundamental principles, our fundamental ideas of decency, respect for life, thinking about others, putting yourself in someone else's place? It seems like it's so easy to do that when you see someone else breaking those rules. But to get to the point where you tell yourself that you're doing it, I mean, this is several programs right here, and something where I love to get other people's perspectives as well as their stories. But a little piece of my story is that I did exactly that. I procrastinated and made excuses and rationalizations for 4 years, really, and I made sort of bargains with myself and false realities and the whole thing. So it's a curse to sort of have a knack for rationalizing and making an argument, because it can be used for good or bad. But now I notice, being on the other side, that people who will spend a lot of effort rationalizing what they do, if they could only make the shift, they'd be just as good at rebutting their own arguments and coming up with a better one. But emotionally, you have to sort of make that admission that you're doing something which is wrong, and really pretty horrible.
I think that that's where we talk about a lot, that people have to hear something like 19 times before it really sinks in. And when we talk about our own transition stories, I don't think we're always aware of those 19 times that led up to it, because that moment where you have to decide whether you're going to face reality or protect your feelings. If there's enough motivation and enough support in different ways from previous times you heard the message, then that aha moment is you're prepared for it. And so that's why, anytime I'm doing activism, I like to count the the seeds that I hope I'm planting, like we all do. And I think that in the case of my brother-in-law, he's heard it 19 times, but there's something else not getting through. And,
Well, I wonder also if hearing it from different sources helps. I think that helps too.
and I think that there's hearing it from different sources, but also it is not always one thing, because for me, the component that was the key ingredient was learning about the sentience of other animals and connecting with a bird who I had never connected with someone so different from the dogs and cats I was used to, and got to understand him as a person, and you with Mike, the cat.
Yeah.
That when you get to know someone who isn't human that well, then everything we've been taught to objectify someone who isn't human is then challenged.
Oh yeah, it gets thrown out the window, really, when you form a relationship with them. And we'll get back to this probably in other other programs. See, we're going to be around for a while, but yeah, that was and it's a common story. But with me, it was at first Mike was a cat, then a special cat, then an example. I mean, in addition to being special, an example of an animal, a non-human who is just incredibly unique, and I wouldn't want anything to happen to him. And eventually, you start thinking, why would I do something to a cow? I mean, they're bigger cats in a way, pigs and all the rest, and it eventually, I mean, it even went to like bugs and stuff. I remember one day I was looking at an ant, and the ant reminded me of Mike, but if I was, up in space, in the space station, looking down at Mike, and just exploring, and, had a destination, and made a decision on the way to stop. Oh, what's that? And, they're, from their viewpoint, they have a whole world that they're in, and I know that they're not exactly like us. But we're not exactly like each other.
Nobody's
either.
Exactly like anybody else,
Right.
regardless of species. And Mike being unique, he's unique in the same way that anyone else is unique, and we're all connected in the same way. Too.
Right. Because after Mike was like the first animal that and I don't even if animals is even the right word. But it's almost a habit, but non-human that I got to know, right? And then I got a bunny. We're failed fosters over and over, my wife and I. And so at first we were just going to foster, right? But after a few weeks, forget it. She's family. So she was much different, right? But unique in her own way. And in math, 3 points makes a plane, and then so me, bunny, cat, we're all on this continuum, right? We're off track. Well, see, we don't really have a track. But where were we? So anyway,
well,
you get to know an animal, and it can have profound circumstances. But even if you don't get to know an animal, they are all unique, and they all have this. How do you describe being alive? How do you there's no words really can describe what it's like to be alive, and the degree to which you want to stay alive and have things you want to do, and that's just in all animals, and so we should. It just seems like such a basic, fundamental, unwritten rule that we should try to respect that and not take that away from them if we can, and it's practical.
Yeah, no matter how long their life is or how useful they are to you, because a lot of times I hear like people say, well, what's the point in that species? I don't care about that species. It's their right is inherent. Their right to life and liberty, and not to be exploited by humans or otherwise harmed in any way possible or practical to avoid.
Let me ask you about rights also, because I think, if you don't mind, okay. So
Stop us if you care.
Yeah, right. So we will get to the Impossible Burger. I think. But
maybe next show.
Yeah, a year from now. But if you're in this movement, right, you start thinking about rights and you think about connections and compassion and this and that. And I've almost gotten to the point where rights to me, I mean, this isn't fully formed, but rights to me are sort of a codification of what we feel in our hearts. We sort of know intuitively, well, at least a lot of us do, that, when I'm petting a dog while I'm talking to you, it's why I'm distracted here, but, when I see her over here, I don't need to know about rights. I know as soon as I see her that we shouldn't do anything bad to her. But how do you really codify that into rights?
They've moved the tripod, so you've got a little bit of the bookshelf in the view now. I had an interesting perspective on rights explained to me recently. I was attending the Cleveland Animal Rights Conference, and an anarchist there made the case that, if I can, paraphrase well enough to represent what they said, and I apologize in advance if I don't, but essentially that if someone rejects the idea of the way of a government at all, then they reject rights, and they prefer the term liberation or freedom. And it wasn't until I left the conference that I realized that there's a difference between legal rights and inherent rights. And I'm usually talking about inherent rights, the basic right not to be exploited by anyone, any human, or harmed in other ways that are avoidable. So I think there's a difference. And we do want, like a lot of us do want, personhood for individuals who aren't human, so that they can be represented in court, and there are a few who aren't human who do have that right. Some non-human primates have that right now in some countries, not ours. I think and I apologize if I'm off on this, but I thought that it was voted into law in some countries. I don't know. And there's the Non-Human Rights Project who's working on legal rights, but there's two different types of rights we're talking about usually.
Yeah, so I think of and this is not my area of expertise, I think of rights as like sort of this bare minimum to achieve justice.
Yeah.
And I'd like to go way beyond that, but I think of rights as just, you can't necessarily say you have a right to be treated nicely. I almost be interesting as an experiment, but...
Good Samaritan laws?
Yeah, something like that. Just but it's a thought experiment. But you can at least say, okay, well, you can't you can't harm someone else if you can, I know there's edge cases, but aside from those, we want the basic right to some autonomy, to not being killed, harmed, that sort of stuff. That alone, if we could just do that to animals, would be a huge improvement, right? But ultimately, what's the ideal world? That we're just full of compassion. That we're nice and we're charitable to humans, non-humans. But it's a long way to go before we're there.
Even if you're not being nice, you don't have to like somebody or be nice to somebody to respect their inherent rights.
Right. You can, because a stranger, you're not in a position to like them really, in any relationship sort of way. But you can see that they're another sentient individual, but getting sort of more philosophical. I've noticed. People are complicated, and I break this all the time. But in general, I think someone said, I love people, I just don't like individuals. But I feel more, especially with the non-humans, but I think with humans also, even though, like I say, I'm just human, I lose my temper and stuff, but just more of a connection, it's just a finite place that we're on, we have such a finite time that we're here, right? There could be something beyond, we don't know, but the part we know about for sure physically, it's not that long, and it goes by quickly. Once you start getting well up into double figures, which is our goal for our audience. No, I'm just kidding.
Just their audience.
Yeah, is it's quick, and some others, some people's lives, and some, dogs and cats to live maybe 15 years, right? And it goes so quickly.
But it's and the passage of time is subjective.
It is right. It is right. So it may seem the same to them, So yeah, I do feel more of just a baseline connection, and maybe that helps when you're not exploiting them. I think when you're exploiting them, you have to sort of build up this rationalization. It's almost us versus them, And it's weird because one of the most common rationalizations is that, we're superior to them, but if we're superior to them, we wouldn't be doing that to them.
Right.
So
and isn't it convenient that the ones saying they're superior, the ones identifying superiority identify themselves as superior?
Right. Yeah, depending on your criteria, they're superior to us. I mean, look what we're doing to the earth, right? We're always these huge wars and everything. When I was playing music for the cows, depending on your criteria, they're way better than we are. Mm-hmm. They're a peaceful collective, Okay, so segueing into the Impossible Burger and Clean Meat. I don't know if the two were like one time. They seem kind of related to me, but they're not exactly the same. But they're products, and I get my perception more and more is that you're pretty good at activism, and I'm not bad myself. One-on-one talking to people. Not as good online, but it's a lot harder online. But one-on-one, pretty good. And so I have lots and lots of good conversations with people. And okay, so what do we have to show for it? Meat consumption's rising all over. Okay, that's a fact. It's rising once again in the U.S. based on some figures that I've seen. It was going down for a while, and I think we prematurely said, we're winning. Just a little short-term blip.
I mean, it's nice to see progress.
Definitely
but progress
nice.
Progress isn't fluid elevation.
Right.
Like we're in a terrible backset right now. This administration.
So anyway, so we don't want to, every time, if this month's sales were a little bit less than last month's sales, it's not necessarily anything. It could be a million things, right? So now that it's going back up here,
well, the Wall Street Journal attributes it to having more money to spend.
Yeah, which I could believe, because I think that's kind of happening around the world too, as they get, two things that I can think of. One is they're getting wealthier, and two,
affected by
we have big multinationals, Purdue and Cargill and so forth, Tyson, who are spreading sort of the factory farm model overseas, and the increased efficiency and lower cost of the meat, of course, comes at a terrible price. But wealth is associated with buying meat right now. So
it always is, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a whole other topic. Why is that, right? Why is sort of dominating over an innocent creature considered a good thing?
And I think humans who have spent a lot of time living in poverty or have been held down by another group of humans do tend to overindulge in things that were denied to them before. I've seen that.
Right.
And so cultures where meat is sort of a novelty to them, to a certain extent.
But the 1% there can have it and they can't have it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we're going to have some people on the show, some who have explored that area a lot more than we have, and they can we've talked about that too. But so I think, what's my turnover rate, right, for getting people to change, and how many of us are there, and what's the entire population of the world, and how long will this take at this rate? And it seems like forever. And so even though I've spent like I took 10 years off my career path just to do pretty much activism, and you've been doing activism like straight on through, and other people do activism and various forms of outreach on behalf of animals, and yet by many measures we're losing, right? And I don't know if the number of activists is going to grow so much, or it's hard to say what will happen, and I know it takes a long time too for these changes to happen. Nonetheless, I don't like the trend, but that's where technology may come in. There are some precedents where you get a new technology and people change, and then after they change, their morals change. Because, again, like we were talking about before, you tend to defend what you're doing, what you're vested in, but it's easier to condemn what you're not doing. So the less vested they are, if they switched to eating meat just because Purdue was selling something and it was from lab meat, and I know that's an edge case because it's still technically from animal, but let's get an easier case. Let's say they're buying Beyond Burgers or something like that. It's all plant-based, and it's got the Purdue label on it, and they're not even going through this whole sort of moral, okay, I shouldn't do this anymore, and my actions are going to follow my new morals, but they just sort of end up doing that. Now that's the default. Then I think they'll end up like condemning eating cows once it's an anachronism, the way they condemn eating dogs now. And the question is, will that work? And is this technology going to do it? And what are the moral qualms about, let's say, getting samples from animals to make a burger?
So
I
that's
got to take a drink.
so that's like the framework we're working with. But okay, so I kind of see it. I'm kind of framing it differently, but I think that I think there's a reaction to seeing the consumption increase, and that the solution has been offered that I think that one of the reasons that solution can seem attractive is because